to the computer. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Another Juneteenth panel. This one is all of me about writing Black memoirs. I have a stunner panel, list of panelists here with me today, and we're going to talk about what it means to put yourself on the page. Please, ladies, go ahead and introduce yourselves and your work, and explain to us all the fabulousness and why everybody should run and pre-order or buy right this second,
honestly. Okay, I'll be that girl. Hi, I'm Mikki Kendall. I have technically cheated and mixed memoir with some academic theory, some critical feminist race theory, and then that is the book Hood Feminist, conveniently placed behind me over my shoulder. Don't you love that meta white moment? I write about serious issues. I try to tie it into my own personal life, into the lives of people I know, because I think sometimes it's easier to process information when you can connect it to the person as opposed to an amorphous, overarching thing that you can kind of be like, okay, well, that's a problem, but it's not anyone I know's problem. You do know a person like that, because if you're reading my book, you know me. Below that, also conveniently placed, is my other book, Amazon's Abolitionist and Activist. If you want to maybe talk to the littles about women's history and the fight for our rights, definitely relevant in these times. Elle and I have a project together with Cereal Box, Black Widow, if you just want to take a complete detour from all the things that we're doing. And I can't remember what I have coming up next, because in case you can't tell, I might have overdone it.
Thank you so much. Let's go with Keah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keah Brown, and my book is titled The Pretty One: On Life, Pop Culture, Disability, and Other Reasons to Fall in Love with Me. It's available for purchase right now, and it really talks about pop culture, Blackness, disability, and sort of what it's like to live with those intersections and be a person in the world that people don't see for multiple reasons, and how I learned to love myself regardless.
Man,
yes.
Oh, no, go.
Oh, okay, good. And coming up next, I have a picture book coming out with Cochlear Books called Sam's Super Seats in fall 2022, about a little Black girl going back to school shopping with her mom and her best friends. And she has these magic seats that come to life and tell her that she's great for resting.
That is adorable. Okay, let me reel it in. And Nichole?
Hi, I'm Nichole Perkins. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and I am a writer and podcast host. I currently am one of the co-hosts of First Aid Kit, which is a podcast that looks at the way pop culture shapes desire. It's basically, cultural criticism through female gaze, I guess you could say. And I have a poetry book that was published in 2018 called Lilith But Dark. And I have a anthology coming out. I contributed to an anthology called A Measure of Belonging, which is 21 writers of color on the new American South. And that is edited by Sanel Barnes. That will be out later this year. And my memoir, which will be out in 2021, next year. It is called Sometimes I Trip on How Happy We Could Be. And that is a line from my favorite Prince song, which is If I Was Your Girlfriend. And it is kind of about everything that made me me. So there's Black Southern womanhood. There is how pop culture has affected my sexuality and the way I express my desire. There are elements of what happened when I joined an online message board community, and how being online also shaped my sexuality and the way that I express myself. So it's a lot of things coming together to show how I ended up being the person that I am. So that will be out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And as y'all can see, I am barely managing to not fangirl right now all over everybody. So let's get started with some questions here. I got a couple basic ones here because these are things that I'm wondering, and I'm sure people who are watching are wondering the difference between like writing a memoir and other types of writing, like how you approach that. What brought you to the point where you're like, I'm going to put myself on the page as opposed to like a fictitious character, and what that was like in trying to get published versus other aspects of like the anthology or the picture book or with cereal box and comics. Like what was the differences there for you?
So for
I'll
me,
go.
oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go.
No, it's fine. You can go.
Okay. Well, it was interesting because I had this big plan to do fiction first. I was like, fiction is my first love. Like, I'm going to tell these stories for these little Black girls everywhere. And then my agent and I sat down and he was like, people do know you for your essays and your like singular work online. So maybe it's okay if you do that first, because I went in full throttle. Like, I'm only publishing fiction first. Maybe I'll do an essay collection, maybe a picture book, but they're not going to come before, full novel fiction. And then I sat down and I was like, okay, I'm writing an essay collection. Like, I literally was like, never mind. I woke up one day and I'm like, I have to do this first. And so it was like really easy, I think, for me to pretend like nobody was going to read it so that I could write it. And then when people started to, I was like, oh, okay. So you're reading this. I have to think about that. But literally the entire writing process for the essay collection was me being like, no one's going to read this. Just write what you want. It's fine. And then it came out into the world. And then with fiction, I was just like, well, this is a story that you're making up. So there's like no pressure there. Whereas like it felt like a little bit more pressure for the nonfiction after it came out, because then people were reading about me as a person deeper than just a one-off essay for like an outlet.
Mikki?
Yeah. So for me, I was publishing fiction and nonfiction at the same time. More nonfiction than fiction, but I had some short stories I sold. I was doing comics already. And I'm sort of the internet's mystery because I only talk about little bits of myself. And people would always say, well, where's your memoir? And I'd say, oh, it's not that interesting. So what happened was that 3 agents ago, I went through a little agent journey, which is
It happens. It happens. I'm on agent number 3 myself.
It does.
Right. The third one is your best one. That's my favorite. But no, so my first agent said, if you want to do this and have it not be too academic, you could do it more like when you're talking on Twitter. I had to do this thing where I tell stories of my misspent youth. And people really love to hear about all of my bad decisions when I was a teenager because I was a bad girl. And so I was like, okay, I'll think about it. And then as I started to talk about issues, because I knew that I'm going to talk about poverty and housing and all of these things, I started to realize that part of how we tune those things out when we hear it as this amorphous thing that's happening to someone we don't know anything about is because it's not real to us. It's not personal to us. So that was sort of the theory going into the writing of Hood Feminism. The pitch for it doesn't look anything like the book. We won't talk about the pitch process because 50 pages later, it's a whole different world. But as I was working on it, I was writing it with the idea that I would give people what I was comfortable with them seeing of my life, not necessarily the full throttle, you can examine every choice I've ever made kind of thing. I know some memoirs really lay everything out. And ultimately, I'm actually a more private person than people realize. So you get to know what I want you to know and nothing else.
Fair. Nichole?
Poetry is actually my first love, and that was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a poet mostly, but I also wanted to be able to eat and pay bills and have a roof over my head. And so for a long time, I strayed away from writing. I was in education, and I just kind of started to veer my way back into writing because I was always I seem to talk more online than I do in real life, like I feel more comfortable being able to write out my thoughts than actually like talk about them. And I got a fellowship at a media company that was about writing about culture, culture essays and things like that. So I was writing a lot about Black women in pop culture, fictional characters, things like that. And also just kind of doing personal essays. I came to writing online through when there was like a lot of personal essay writing that was happening. And there weren't that many, from what I could tell, there weren't that many Black women who were writing these personal essays that were without trauma, that were without like going back into their past and, you know, excavating pain and sorrow and then trying to have a happy ending with that. And so I was like, what if I just want to write something that's like, this is just a thing. It's not like traumatic for me other than maybe a broken heart, you know, that kind of thing. Like, what if Black women just talked about something that wasn't a burden or whatever. So I started to kind of like think about that more. I did the fellowship that was about culture writing, and I realized that I kind of had a theme going with the essays that I was doing, the personal essays that I was doing. And I started sending out some proposals. Again, that was a process because I was told, you know, maybe if I could be more like Roxane Gay or more like Mindy Kaling. And I felt like, and you know, you never know if it's really your, you know, if it was truth or just whatever, but I was feeling like these people were just throwing out any brown skinned person that was a little thick at me to be like, you know, and it wasn't, they were writing totally different things. I'm not necessarily a humor writer, so why would I write like Mindy Kaling? You know, I'm not, you know, doing a lot of academic feminist research and writing the way Roxane Gay kind of does a little bit. So I wasn't really sure why they were trying to change what I was writing into someone else. So I just kind of eventually moved into writing the memoir because kind of like what Mikki said, I want to share, but I want to share what I want to share. And I was concerned about doing an autobiography because my memory's not great. And I was like, I don't want to write something and then somebody like tries to fact check me or tries to play gotcha or something. And it's all like the timeline is messed up. Tayari Jones once told me, she was like, when you write fiction, people look for the truth. And when you write nonfiction, people look for the lie. And so that's kind of stayed with me. And I want to make sure that what I am writing is factually true and spiritually true. So the memoir, my memoir is more going to be a memoir and essays because again, it has that theme of my Black Southern childhood and sexuality and pop culture. So it's not like every single chapter is going to be, you know, age 5, age 10, age 15, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to do this thread of pop culture and sexuality through it because that makes it, I don't want to say easier, but it helps me stay on track with what I'm trying to write and share. And it also helps me avoid the pressure of being factually correct when I can't remember what, you know, everything that happened when I was 5 years old. I can't remember everything that happened when I was 10 years old. And memory is tricky anyway. There are a lot of things that, you know, kind of fold over until you have, you know, this origami piece of memory and you have to unfold it and figure out what's the actual truth of it. So that's kind of how I ended up at memoir. I want to also do fiction. I'm a big fan of romance novels, but I felt like I wanted to put my voice as a Black woman out there in this field of memoir where, again, it's not just here's all the trauma, here's how to keep a man kind of stuff. I just wanted to be, I just want to show that there are different, I don't know, that Black womanhood is diverse, you know, and they're all, we look like all kinds of things. We have different experiences. And so I wanted to get the memoir out first, and then I feel like I can move on to fiction, which will include romance novels and maybe something more quote unquote literary as well. And then
quote unquote, I like that.
Yeah, you know, like romance.
How they be doing. Yeah, they be trying to dog some of the genre fiction. And all of y'all touched on the next question that I have, which is, you know, how did you decide how much to give away, how much to put on the page? Like, what was sacred, you know, that you were like, you can't see this at all? I mean, you don't have to say what was sacred because it's sacred, you know, but like treading that line between, okay, here's what I'm putting out there versus here's kind of a peek of what you can see versus, yeah, I'm not gonna ever know about this. How did you make that decision for yourself and for whatever it was you were trying to say with the story or the essays? Because like you said, yours had a more, Nichole, you were doing this pop culture sexuality thing. With Mikki, yours was, you know, taking feminism from being this amalgamous thing and be like, hey, you can attach it to me and what I'm talking about with my life. And Keah, you were talking about, you know, writing at those intersections where you were writing as if nobody was ever going to see this, and then they started seeing it and you were like, oh, okay. So how did you decide which pieces and how much of those pieces would be presented to us? And thank you for sharing yourselves with us, for deciding to do that, because I got 2 of the books that I've read and I've loved them. I'm looking forward to the 3rd one, getting it and loving that one as well. So you got a fan here. So how did you decide what to share with us?
I'll go first. Well, I'm already a confessional writer in my poetry. I tend to put myself a lot into my poetry or put the confessions of other people into my poetry. So I felt okay with sharing myself, but when it came to sharing the way my parents' relationship affected me and my subsequent relationships, I had to be very careful. And I was very cognizant of how my mother would feel reading this. I mean, she's read my poetry. She knows that I talk about my father's abuse towards her and his issues with addiction and alcoholism. So those are things that I've talked about. And I remember when I told my mom that I got the book deal and it was going to be a memoir, she was like, well, how much are you going to talk about? And so I kind of had that in my head as I started shaping the chapters and things like that. And it's not that I don't want to tell the truth. I don't want to re-traumatize my mother. And, you know, my mother knows how I am when it comes to sex and being silly and all that kind of stuff. But I think for her, she has this blind spot about how her relationship with my father affected me. And so I am being very careful about that and how I talk about that. I have, if I can give a preview, I have a chapter on how watching Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy makes me think of my parents in a particular way. And so I take that painful stuff and I kind of put it with something that, again, comes from pop culture that helps, you know, kind of, it's easier for me to synthesize and, you know, break it down. And it's not in a way that I feel like my mother would be, you know, hurt all over again or feel exposed all over again.
Keah?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was sort of like I was okay with sharing specific things about how I saw situations, but I never wanted to dive into like how some other person might have felt in that same situation. So I tried to toe the line between like, this is how I feel about, you know, my relationship with my sister. Like I wrote in the book, there's an essay all about our relationship. And I asked Leah before it went to print, I was like, hey, do you want to read this? And she was like, no, I want to read it when it's all the way done. But I was very purposefully, I made sure that I didn't say anything that I thought might impact her life, because this was my story and I didn't want her to be like, oh, this is going to impact me negatively because people are going to think X, Y, and Z. So I pretty much tried my best in every situation in the book to at least show my side of something and give myself the onus to explain it the best way that I knew how without putting other people's, you know, sort of reputations or whatever in danger, because I decided to write a memoir and people decided to, you know, be in my life. And it's funny because there are a couple of things in the book that I never talked about, and they were my hard line, but I ended up talking about them in individual pieces later, like relationships that I had with certain people and why they went south. I was like, oh, I'm not going to talk about it for the book, but I ended up talking about it eventually. But that really took a lot of therapy sessions. So, yeah, I eventually got there to talk about those things, but I just couldn't for the book because I was like, I don't want to do something like that without talking to the other people that it's about first. And I wouldn't normally do that, but for those specific things, I did because they were like sensitive.
Yeah. Mikki.
So I kept it largely about my adult life with little peeks at my childhood. I have a complicated family dynamic. I was raised by grandparents until I was a teenager, and then there's a lot of family backstory. And it's not that so much that it's a secret as it is that thing you talk about when people try and dig up the facts. They try to find a lie in your. Someone went so far before this book, someone went so far as to contact an old employer of mine. Right.
Oh my God.
And while my relationship with my parents is very complicated, that is not actually a secret, even from them, I did not want to put my aging, sick parents through internet jerks because I had seen what happened with Lindy's parents, the writer of show, Lindy West, where they made an account with her recently deceased father's face to tell her he was ashamed of her. And like, to be blunt, I come from the kind of people who shoot shit. I might want to pull up on you. They're just doors we don't open to the public because you might catch one in the face. So let's just keep these things closed. Other things like talking about my ex-husband and his abuse, that was, as far as I was concerned, fair game. I walked a careful line in terms of detail because I have kids and there are things that my kids never need to read. But all of my concerns were around the people around me and what would impact them. Otherwise, I know the internet is judging me. The internet is always judging you, right? And I don't really care. And people still have long-winded opinions about various details, right? When I talk about being on food stamps, or I talk about divorcing my ex and living in public housing, I have an email somewhere from someone who had like their litany of ways I could have done my life better in 1999, 2000. I opened that email and I was like, oh, okay, click, we're just not gonna. But my focus was less on what people would think or what was, comfortable or uncomfortable for me. So some of what's in there was uncomfortable for me, but I didn't have a problem with blowback being on the person I was talking about. Things that I kept closer to the chest were more about whether or not the consequences would be disproportionate, right? If you're upset about something that happened when I was 12 and want to yell at my parents, I'm over it, so you should be too. If you want to relitigate my divorce, well, if you can find my ex and relitigate with him, it's great. But what you're not going to do is attempt to relitigate me marrying my current husband so soon after I got that divorce kind of thing. There were things where I was just like, these are hard lines because the internet can judge me, but the internet can't be in my business, or if somebody I care about's business. Or even sometimes people I don't care about's business because the internet needs to get some business of its own.
That part, yeah, like that part. And I want to slide into another question that you kind of all touched on in answering this last question, but very much so beforehand as well. Y'all are kind of answering my questions before I get to ask them, so I get to sit up here and look like I don't know what I'm doing. How did you, and this is part of like crafting the memoir and taking those pieces that you were like, this is what I want to share. This is what's nobody's business. This is that door that'll get you shot, as you said, Mikki. How did you go about approaching the structure of the narrative? Because I know, Nichole, you said that trying to do this, 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old thing, because of how memory is, you couldn't really do it in this chronological way. And I mean, they're essays, so they're not like, and then we went down by the pond and did this, and then we went over here like you would in a fictional setting. So how did you approach, where things would be structured? Did you do them around topics? Did you do them around themes? Did you have certain areas, like parts of the book where you were like, this is family life, this is kids, this is, past versus present, or that sort of thing? Did you have an approach, or did it all come together and then you went in and you moved it around during edits? Like, how did that work?
So I did topics, and you can see at the top of each chapter, like poverty, homelessness, housing, that kind of stuff. But the reason I did topics is that when I was doing my original pitch. There were certain things I wanted to talk about. And at one point, there was a plan that would involve using hashtags. Don't ask. Glad we didn't do that. Thanks. But as I was going through that plan, I didn't want to do that, and didn't want to do this, and didn't want to do, like Nichole said, that at 5I, at 15I, because life doesn't really flow that way. Like, you don't make your decisions based off what happens in a single moment. You base them off cumulative experience usually. And so what I wanted to do was show that the idea that you could make the perfect choice at a given moment, or that someone is an exception because they made the right choice that time, was a lie, right? I made the wrong choice a bunch of times. I came out okay, but I have a story about making out with the possible ghost in a graveyard because I make bad decisions at 16, right? And I just wanted to kind of remove that narrative that you somehow float through life always making the good decisions, and if you don't, then that's when the bad thing happens to you, and make it really clear that people struggle and they get up or don't, depending upon what's going on and what has gone on before. So that was sort of my focus. That was sort of the through line for mine, was that if you were thinking of me as, well, why didn't you, well, if you could do it, why couldn't other people? I could do it because I had X, Y, and Z happen right at these points, as opposed to I made all the right decisions and look at me and everyone should be like me.
Nichole?
So I originally started out kind of, even though I wasn't going to go in chronological order, I still wanted to be kind of a vague childhood, first adult relationships, and then more present day stuff. But as I was writing the essays and trying to figure out where I wanted them to go, I was kind of bouncing back and forth in each essay, like childhood to adulthood and back to childhood and things like that. So I realized that maybe it wasn't going to go in the chronological order. And then I wrote this chapter that was about one of the Real Worlds, one of the seasons of The Real World from MTV. And I don't know if y'all remember, but there was this woman, I think it was Seattle, and this woman, she is now a doctor, Camila. She, of course, was like the one Black woman on the show. And she had this incredible list of qualities a man had to have in order for her to marry him, or even to date, I think. It was something like that. And so on her list, it was stuff like, has to have more than one syllable in a name or something like that. Like, she was very like down to the details of what she wanted. And so my chapter on that is talking kind of about what I want in a partner. And my agent read the chapter and she was like, what if we took the list? Because I ended up putting my own list in the chapter so people could see kind of my evolution of what I wanted at the time when I was like in my 20s or whatever. So she was like, why don't we take some of these qualities from this list, and that can be the chapter headings, and then that's how we will group each section or whatever. And I was like, okay, I kind of like that, so there was like generosity, open-mindedness, things like that. And so the chapters then kind of formed around that list, like that. So they're not necessarily in order. There's not, it's not in kind of chronological order, but it's about kind of circling around that list of desires, I guess. And so that took a little bit to get to that point, because I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted it to go. But sometimes you write something and then you are able to pull from that and, find the organization there.
Keah?
Yeah, for me, it was like, I told my agent, the first thing I said was, hey, Alex, if I'm going to write this collection, I'm going to write about the things that I don't normally get to write about in my freelance. Because when you're a Black woman, as you all know, they only let you write about certain things. And I was like, I'm not doing that. If I'm going to have this opportunity, I'm going to take it to write about TV shows and movies and all of these sorts of pop culture things. And so for me, it was like, I named the chapters very like flippant things that I thought were funny and like smart, because I was like, this isn't going to be, I want people to take me seriously, but I was like, this isn't going to be like a button up, super like serious essay collection. Like, I'm going to talk about tough stuff, but I'm not going to sacrifice my own humor for it. So really it was like, I'm not going to do everything in order because, again, my memory is trash. It's not trash, but it's bad. And so I was like, I'm just going to talk about things under the lens of, like, these are events that happened and common themes in my life. Like, early on in the book, I talk about the woman who stopped me at Walmart, and she was like, I don't know what's wrong with you, honey, but I'm praying for you and God heals all. And so I go into a chapter about every single time that somebody has offered me healing for my CP. Like 2 weeks ago, I got a DM about an essential oil that's supposed to heal me on Twitter. So it's like a constant thing. And so a lot of it was just like, this is a theme, a common theme in my life. And whether I was at age 12 or 23, these are the things that happened, and that's how I did the chapters, instead of worrying about like, this was age 5, 6, 7, 8, because there was no way I was going to remember all of that. But yeah, so yeah, mine was very theme-based, and me sort of bringing in each point in my life through a pop culture reference, just because pop culture is like very much my thing. So I brought in everything that happened in my life through a pop culture reference. Like at the beginning of my essay with my sister is me talking about The Wedding Date, which stars Deborah Messing and Dermot Mulroney. So I literally, like, every chapter was that way, where it was like, here's a pop culture reference to get you excited, but then here's the nitty gritty of how it relates to my lived experiences.
So listening to how you all structured these things and how you put them together, and how it wasn't based on, you know, I was born and then life. It was based around things that happened, as you were saying, that it's not on this one moment, it's from, you know, the litany of experiences. In those experiences, in writing this, in being one of those experiences, would you ever do something along the lines of, not an addendum, but sort of like, because do memoirs have sequels, first of all? Like, do you do that sort of thing where it's like, this is because I understand it takes a while to put all of that into the book, and as you're writing the book, other things happen that maybe don't coalesce until after the book comes out. You're like, oh, I see this part of my life now has this happening. Would you ever do I don't know about memoirs. Are they called sequels? Are they just called companions? Like, how does it work? But would you add to that? Would you do a second set of essays? Would you do another memoir on feminism or on another issue? Would you have that, you know, I've added 5 more things to the list. Here's a novella to accompany, you know, the book that comes out. And let's start with Keah.
Yeah, I would. Mostly
crying,
just, but I don't know if it would be a full, I literally, I feel you, I get it. I don't know if I would do a full book though, but there are things that I wish that I put in The Pretty One that I didn't. Like, I came out last year on Coming Out Day, and I was like, oh, I wish I would have put that in there. Like, I wish I would have been ready to put that in there. But I think if I did another collection of essays, I would have to be like older than I am now. Like, I'm 28 right now, so I'm like, if I do another collection of essays, I would need to do it in like 10 more years. Like, I need to live more life first, because right now I feel like it would just be me being like nitpicky about certain things. Like, let me add this in there, let me take that out, let me say this, let me pull that back. Whereas like, I would want to have a full other set of lived experiences first before I do it again.
That makes sense. Mikki.
My neighbor is obsessively vacuuming his side yard. Sorry, I muted myself. Not vacuuming, mowing. It sounds like vacuuming because y'all, there's nothing there. There's no extra. Oh, yes.
There's no extra.
But no, so I would probably actually at some point do a pure memoir, but it wouldn't be until everybody in my range of elders was dead, because I don't want those phone calls. My family has a lot of secrets that are not really secrets. And at some point I want to write about the things that Black families hide that are not even necessarily bad, right? So there are things that, like in our family, I knew that my grandmother's parents had gone through several names, and then the story of why they went through those names is really actually kind of great. It involves the sentence, well, after they killed those white men, and I was like, wait. Right? And I think we all have like one auntie who will just tell you something like you already knew that's never been told. And so I asked the question, this is the answer I got. And I eventually got the whole story, and I would eventually like to write about those things, about the things that we hide in terms of our history. And I kind of want to tie it to some other stuff because apparently I always want to tie my memoirs to current events. But that is a next book, maybe not decision. I've put out 3 projects in less than a year, so I don't make decisions right now about next projects by order of everyone that knows me, including my children. you go over there and take a nap is sort of where we are, but I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking it would not so much be a sequel as it would be talking about the rest of my life and the way that ties to their lives, kind of a thing.
I want to say that is a dope first line in a story is after they killed those white men. Okay. Nichole.
I don't know that I would necessarily. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure my cat is like she's about to jump, so I'm trying.
She's testing it.
Yeah.
Okay. I heard the baby. Yep, I heard it.
I don't know that it would be. I do think I want to do a dating memoir because I have a lot of stories about dating and the crazy things that men have said or done to me on dates, and just I also wanted to talk about my weird sexual experiences, that kind of thing, because again, I don't think that we get a lot of that from Black women. That is not about, and this is how you keep a man, and this is how you get married, and that kind of thing. Because I think that white girls get memoirs that's just like, I did a lot of drugs and I drank a lot of alcohol and I still kept my job and now I make 6 figures and now you're reading about my life kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, I want to do that. I can do that. I mean, I don't have the 6 figures yet, but I can do that. So if I did write another memoir, it would be more on like dating stuff and relationship stuff that is not just, this is how I got here, but that was a little freer. And I was able to just kind of like talk about the experiences and, just something a little more humorous, I think. I could see myself doing that. But as far as doing another, just like straight memoir, or any kind of like autobiography, I don't think that I would do that.
So this question is one, I'm going to switch it up a little bit because people will ask, oh, what's your favorite book or something like that? And mine changes depending on the mood I'm in or whether or not it's Tuesday, or what book made you want to be a writer? And that answer is never a single book for me. So do you have any writerly icons that sparked, a drive to be like, hey, I want to do this? Seeing, even if it was a single book that they wrote, that's fine. But I wanted to open it up to more than just what book got you into writing. Was there a particular author? Was there a particular style? Was it a particular moment in time where you were like, this needs to go on the page? Like, what drove you? And not just for the memoir. Talk about that too. Like, what sparked this memoir in particular? But also, what sparked you wanting to do this thing with words that seems to be thankless for us in particular? Mikki.
So for me, I've always written. I was one of those kids, because of the aforementioned complicated childhood. No one used to read me stories, and I would see them on TV, and I thought that was the greatest thing ever. Don't ask. But I was an early reader, so I would make up stories to tell myself. I've always been a singularly self-focused child. And so one of the things was that when I was in school, I was that kid that daydreamed, was not living up to my potential. because I would scribble little stories or do other things. So in 3rd grade, Mrs. Longley, shout out to Black teachers, she decided that she was going to put me in what was then, I think, gifted creative writing, or it had some long-winded name that boiled down to, you kids who daydream and scribble, we're going to put you in this room with each other so you can get on one person's nerves instead of everyone else's nerves. And through that class, I got to meet Gwendolyn Brooks. I was supposed to be turning in a poem. I am not a poet. I respect all of you poetry-minded people. I am not one of you. And instead I turned in a short story about 2 sisters stopping a robbery and then escaping with the goods themselves because they weren't really the heroes. They were there to do the robbery and someone else did it, so they robbed the robbers. Again, very complicated little brain. So I got to meet her because she just wanted to meet the child instead of a poem had turned in a story. And she told me, and it was very sweet of her, she was always very smart, that it didn't matter what anybody else said. If the words were in you, you had to let them out. And let them out whatever way worked. And so I started writing before I remember not writing, and then I just kept going. What changed for me was getting to a point where I was on the internet and realizing that all of these people were writing and selling and publishing and whatever, and I kept doubting myself. And there comes a point, and this is going to sound really petty. There was a guy in comics, his name is Rob Liefeld, I want to say. I always say it wrong. He draws a Captain America that looks like a pile of canned tams. That's what I know about him. Ella's heard this story before. And I saw his work, and I am team petty. I am petty 5 petty. And I realized that if he could have an entire career writing and drawing Captain America like a pile of canned tams, what was I waiting for? Clearly, I was good enough. Let me try. We all are, because I bet you don't think that anyone's shoulder looks like that canned ham that used to be for sale in the grocery department that smelled real funny. I bet you don't.
Oh my God. I could understand that absolutely, because that's kind of how I got started was, see, and no hate and no shade to anybody who enjoys Twilight at all, but I saw that first movie and then I read that book and I was like, well, damn it, if she can do it, I can do it. So that I absolutely understand. Once again, no hate or shade to anybody. The book did its job, what it was supposed to do. But that's how I got into writing. So I absolutely understand. Nichole.
So, like I said before, poetry is my first love, and how I got into that, I found this book after my great grandmother passed. She, I guess my mother picked up one of the break fronts from her house. I don't know what you call it. Break front, China hutch, kind of.
China cabinet.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So we inherited one of those, and she had all these books in there, and Madia didn't know how to read, so I was like, why would Madia have these books in this break front? So I was looking through, and there was romance novels, and that's kind of how I started my love of romance novels. And then there was also this book, poetry book called The Black Poets, that was edited by Dudley Randall, and I was looking through it, and that was the first time that I knew like that Black people wrote poetry. And it was like, there were hymns and, there's Phyllis Wheatley, and there is, just all these people. And I got to Sonia Sanchez. There was like a section with Sonia Sanchez in there. And I was like, oh, I love her. I want to read more of her stuff. And so I kept reading Sonia Sanchez, Ntozake Shange. For Color Girls, like I'm sure everybody, changed my life. The first time I saw it, it was in high school, and my classmates put on a production of For Color Girls, and I could see my mother and my aunts in that story. The same with Their Eyes Were Watching God. That was the first time that I felt like I understood my great grandmother reading that. And so I wanted to keep reading and writing those stories. Also, I was a really big fan of murder mysteries. I love me some Murder, She Wrote and Columbo and stuff like that. And so like one of the first things that I ever wrote that I like mass produced, which was basically I just went to the principal's office and made a bunch of copies and stapled them and then passed them out. It was a murder mystery. And I wish I still had a copy of that, but it was good. I know that it was good because I had somebody, the husband had killed his wife, and the detective, who was a woman, she realized what had happened because he had left the body in the greenhouse in order to throw the body temperature off so people wouldn't know how long his wife had been dead. Like, I was smart with my stuff. I was, and I was great. Anyway, so I was writing all that stuff, but like, Their Eyes Are Watching God, Toni Morrison, of course. Song of Solomon is my favorite book of all time. And I know there's no way that I could ever write like Toni Morrison, but I was so impressed by the way that she wrote. I was like, how can I, have my own way of writing like this? Like, I can't write like her, but what can I do for myself to get these things out? So like,
wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Did the person who manages to shift between lyrical prose and then telling us about who's pretty enough to bang and who's not just say she couldn't write like some? Did she say that, y'all?
I mean, I heard. That's what I heard.
Same.
I heard it too.
I mean, are you serious right now? Because you write beautifully.
Thank you.
You really do.
Thank you.
And I am not a pretty writer. That is not my thing. So don't you ever again. I will be in your DMs talking to you like I'm your line sister. Never again. Yeah. All right, we had to segue right there for a second. Nichole got up.
All of that was just like how I ended up getting into writing. And for memoir, reading Maya Angelou, not again, but bell hooks, all, when I got to college, and it's always, this is a little tangent, but it's always strange to me when I see people on Twitter who are like, this year I'm only going to read books by Black women. And I'm like, I've been doing that since maybe I was 13. Like, why is it so difficult for you? Why are you just now starting at your big age? Like, that.
I mean, okay, so this is a segue, but can we just have a brief moment to talk about how basically there is a Black girl canon of, right? So you read Maya Angelou, you read Toni Morrison, you probably read Terry McMillan. There's this whole range of folks. And then you get out here, and this goes back to my petty thing, and you're reading the other stuff, and we've all been comparing ourselves to literary greats, right?
Yeah.
I completely understand why you say, I can't write like Toni Morrison. I feel that way about N.K. Jemisin, and we're friends, and I'm still like, I don't know what did you do here? How did you put the there and the there? But then I see how people don't read the greats, but they're not concerned about being like them. Right?
Right.
Listen, I got to talk to Terry McMillan, and for like the first 5 minutes of this conversation, I was the stuttering, hi, ma'am, right? But they don't read it, they don't know it, and then they seem so surprised when we write in a different tradition, but they don't know anything about that tradition, right? Someone told me that they had no idea what Eve's Bayou was. And I was like, you're a Southern Gothic writer who doesn't. I had pearls, I would clutch them.
You right.
But that's the thing, they approach, and I'm using they in a very vague sense, but y'all know what I'm talking about.
Say they. This is the Juneteenth Book Fest. Say they. It's fine.
They don't want to
read
literature until they're trying to like educate themselves on a struggle, or until they're feeling guilty, and they're like, I don't know, but like, you can read Black literature for the same reason you read, your beach reads, right? There's pleasure in Black literature. There is joy in Black literature. There is escape in Black literature. So For you just to be
Tell
like,
them.
okay, I want to learn about, 1960s Ohio and the struggle. Let me go find whatever book, or, let me go whatever. You don't have to do that. You can just read Black literature because it's good and it's very well written, and our traditions, from the way that we can bring those oral traditions to the page. Okay, yes.
No, you see, that's that's a whole nother hour-long discussion.
I mean, because if we're gonna talk about writing in multiple genres, like, let's keep it a buck. Some of the best multi-genre writers are coming out of our tradition.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where you develop that skill to tell a story in multiple ways. Right?
Yeah.
And I sometimes, I'll be honest, I sometimes am just like, y'all doubt yourself? If you could see the stuff that I've seen.
Listen, yeah. Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
Have the supreme, I'm going to point out, this is shady, but okay. Somebody got an $800,000 advance for a video. And I'm just going to point out, having looked at that page.
Did y'all see that? What in the?
I just want y'all to understand that you need to have the confidence. I don't even know what to call that, because mediocre is being real kind. But you need to have the confidence to turn in a Gatsby knockoff meets Penthouse Letters with less flow, and then cash that check. I'm gonna put it that way. Sorry y'all. I ain't acting right today.
It's fine.
I mean,
take us to church. Just take us to church. Keah, I don't forgot what the question I asked was. What did I ask? Do you remember what I asked?
Favorite books
About our favorite.
Yes.
About
How
our
did you
favorite
get started writing?
books,
Okay,
people.
thank you. Okay, Keah.
Well, my favorite book I read in 4th grade. It was Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary, and like I was obsessed with that book. I was like, I want to make somebody feel the way that like Mr. Henshaw is making this kid feel. I was like, this is gonna be me. I'm gonna impact someone like this. And so I ran home. Well, I didn't really run. I limped home, and I found a notebook, and I wrote like my first short story. It was terrible. I have the confidence to say that it was really bad, but I just kept writing like every single day, and I would pop the little notebook under my dresser, and every single day I would add something to the story. So the story ended up like a full novel at this point, but I was just like writing it out by hand and like going through multiple notebooks, and none of it ever made any sense. But that's when I knew that I wanted to be a writer. And then I read, like everybody else, Toni Morrison and Dr. Maya Angelou, and I was like, this is it. Like, they're doing it for a living, that maybe I can do it for a living, and like I'm not going to be as good as them. I'm also not a pretty writer. I tried to be, but it just doesn't pan out. And so I was like, either way, I'm just going to write because I feel like I can, because they do. And like my book came out on the day that Toni Morrison died. Mm-hmm. And boy, I struggled. I was like, how do I celebrate this moment in my life when we just lost literally the greatest writer in the world? And I was like, I think I did AM to DM, and they asked me about it. And they were like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, I'm gutted, because how do you find joy when you're like grieving this person that you never knew but impacted you so greatly? And my whole thing was like, I can't thank Toni Morrison in person anymore, but I can try to be the best writer that I can be under, like, with the knowledge that I'm standing on her shoulders to do it. And that's sort of how I like think about writing going forward, where it's like I'm obviously always going to enjoy the work that Toni gave us and Dr. Maya Angelou, and even when Beverly Cleary passes, her as well. But it's also just like, I hope to be that for someone one day, because I think that's just as important as like the book writing itself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. And we are I would love nothing more than to go for like another hour, because we just opened up a whole bunch of stuff, and I feel might warrant its own panel at some point, just to discuss. But we're getting up on that time. See, now you done made me. Okay, bringing it back. This is why. See, I can't have you as guests in my house, because then I just start acting ridiculous. What? We're getting up on that time, as they say in church, and I want to thank you all for coming and sharing yourselves in this panel on the page. I have read both your book, Keah, and your book, Mikki, and I'm so looking forward to yours, Nichole, to add it to my collection, because I'm gonna be honest, I did not read memoirs before y'all, outside of, you know, the books by the greats that we've been discussing. Like, I didn't read any modern memoirs because I didn't see us on those shelves, and I don't want to read them. I don't want to read about the same documentaries I'm gonna see for whatever reason. I want to hear bits and pieces of myself and my ancestry when I read those pages. So thank you. And real quick, once more through, is there anything that you would want people specifically to take away from your work when they step away from it? Just to wrap us off. Keah.
Yeah, joy is very much the center of all of my work. I believe in a happily ever after because people like us don't get them. And so when you read something of mine, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, you're going to get as close to a happy ending as possible. Because when you live in a Black disabled queer body, you're like, no one like me gets the guy or the girl or the person in the end. No one like me gets to find joy. And so I feel like what I want people to know about the work that I do is that whether you like it or not, there's going to be joy. And I'm not just going to harness trauma for anybody's benefit. If I'm going to talk about something traumatic, I'm going to leave you with the knowledge that joy is always on the other side of it. And if it's not, it's coming. And that's just how I feel about my work in general. Like, you're going to get this joy and you're going to like it. If you don't, that's your problem. Like, that's not my thing. I love joy.
Okay. Nichole. See, yeah, okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. It's okay.
From my work, from the memoir, I want people to get a better idea, again, of the diversity of Black womanhood. I want people to recognize that being Southern and Black is a beautiful thing, and it doesn't necessarily have to stay rooted in racist trauma. I want people to recognize that sexuality is, it's okay to express your sexuality, whatever it is. It's okay to be a person filled with desire. It's okay to like what you like, and that you should be able to express yourself without being shamed. And if someone tries to make you feel bad for the way that you express yourself, then you don't need that person in your life. So I just want people to, you know, I mean, that all seems very heavy, but I do want people, like Keah said, to find joy in my work and to be able to like laugh and have a good time with it. But then also, you know, I guess just find this, I don't know, talking about sexuality, I guess it's a Trojan horse to your joy, to your own happiness, to your own security within yourself. So I want people to feel good about themselves and to be able to like cut unnecessary people out of their lives.
I hear that one for sure. Mikki.
My work, I want people to come away feeling like it's fine for them to inhabit their own purpose, to be who they are and do what they feel like they need to do, even if other people don't approve of it. I want people to come away understanding that respectability is a trap. There's no win at the bottom of that barrel. And you can dive and dive and dive, or you can just knock the barrel over and keep on going. And I want them to know that their feelings, including and especially anger, are valid. right? Not that you shouldn't be happy, not that you shouldn't feel desire, all of these things, but I want us to stop saying that being an angry Black woman or being angry at all is bad. If things are screwed up, your rage is a respectable emotion because your rage is a valid emotion. Your rage is the emotion that you are entitled to feel, and you are entitled to use it to do what you feel like you need to do. And you don't need anyone else's approval. They don't need to like how you express yourself or any of a dozen one other pitfalls that respectability and other things will set up for you, right? The skin that you're in, this meat suit we're all riding around in, the only person that has to face it in the mirror every morning is you. So whatever other people think of it is their business. It's only your problem if it interferes with you. Otherwise, be yourself. Do what you need to do. And if that means you tackle big major issues, you tell, that neighbor that's mowing their lawn for 37 times to kick rocks, whatever it is you need to do, you feel comfortable enough in yourself and confident enough in yourself to understand that the world is going to judge you regardless. You might as well do what you want to do and be okay with who you are.
Thank you so much. Thank all three of you. This was Juneteenth Book Fest. This was all of me about Black memoirs. And like I said, I think those other topics need to be a panel. So y'all watch your emails. Just keep an eye out. I'm gonna leave with that. And y'all have a good one.
Thanks.